The morning sun barely touched the sky when John pushed himself out of bed. His body ached from the long hours at the factory the previous day, but his heart carried a heavier burden. Zoe, his wife, stirred softly beside him. Her voice was gentle, almost fragile. "John, are you leaving this early again?" she whispered, her eyes half closed. "I have to," he replied with a tired smile. "If I do not take the extra shifts, we will not have enough for rent this month." Zoe reached for his hand, her touch warm and filled with worry. "I wish you would rest at least one morning. John, you have been pushing yourself too hard." He squeezed her hand before letting go. "Do not worry, Zoe. One day all this will be worth it. I just want you to have everything you deserve." John pulled on his worn boots, the soles patched so many times that the stitches looked like scars. He stepped outside, the cool air greeting him. The streets were quiet, except for a few neighbors, who eyed him with disdain. "There goes John again," someone muttered loud enough for him to hear. "Always running around like a beggar, just to survive." Another voice laughed. "He should just admit he is a failure. No matter how hard he works, he will never make it." John kept walking, his jaw tight but his spirit refusing to break. He had learned to swallow the bitterness of mockery, because he knew every step he took was for Zoe and the life he promised her. At the bus stop, an old man nodded at him. "Morning, John. Off to work again." "Morning, Mr. Harris," John replied. "Gotta keep going, you know." The old man sighed. "You are stronger than most. Do not let their words eat at you." John forced a smile, though his heart was heavy. He boarded the bus and sat by the window, staring at the passing scenery of cracked sidewalks and peeling buildings. His thoughts drifted back to Zoe. He remembered the day they married, her laughter bright as bells. Despite their humble ceremony, she had chosen him when she could have chosen someone wealthier, someone who could have given her comfort without struggle. Instead, she chose a man with nothing but determination. Hours later, John arrived at the factory. The machines roared, drowning out every thought. Sweat poured down his back as he lifted heavy boxes. His hands blistered and raw. His supervisor barked orders, never sparing kindness. "John, you are too slow again," the supervisor snapped. "If you cannot keep up, maybe I should find someone else." "I will do better," Sir John answered quickly, swallowing the humiliation. As the day dragged on, John pushed himself harder. Every ache in his muscles was a silent promise to Zoe. He endured the sneers of co-workers, the cruel jokes that painted him as desperate. Still, he kept his head low and his heart steady. When the shift finally ended, John trudged home under the dim glow of streetlights. His body screamed for rest, but the thought of Zoe waiting at home gave him strength. The moment he stepped through the door, Zoe rushed to greet him. "You look so tired, John. Please sit. I made some soup." John smiled faintly. "I am fine, Zoe. Just being here with you makes it worth it." They sat together at the small wooden table, their hands brushing across the surface. Despite the hardships, their bond was unshakable. But deep inside, John knew the challenges ahead would only grow heavier. The next morning, John woke before dawn again. His body begged for rest, but he forced himself up. Zoe stirred lightly, pulling the thin blanket closer around her shoulders. John looked at her sleeping face, whispering softly to himself, "One day, Zoe, you will not have to worry about food or bills. One day, I will give you a life worth living." He left quietly, but as he stepped outside, he met two neighbors leaning against a fence. They smirked as they saw him carrying his battered lunchbox. "There he goes again," one of them said, "chasing pennies, while the rest of us move forward." The other added with a laugh, "His wife must regret marrying him. Look at the life he drags her into." John paused for a moment, but did not respond. He tightened his grip on the lunchbox and kept walking. Inside, anger twisted, but he swallowed it. For Zoe, silence was strength. At the bus, a young man in a neat suit sat beside him. The man glanced at John's calloused hands and dusty boots. "Rough life you have, huh?" John gave a small smile. "It is rough, yes, but it is honest." The young man chuckled. "Honest work does not pay. You should learn how the world really works." John turned his gaze back to the window, refusing to argue. He believed in his way, even if the world mocked him for it. The factory greeted him with its usual roar. John worked harder than anyone else, yet his paycheck never stretched far enough. During the lunch break, he sat alone at the edge of the loading bay. His co-workers gathered nearby, their voices carrying easily. "Look at him eating bread again," one sneered. "Probably cannot even afford meat." Another laughed. "His wife must be starving. Maybe she will leave him for someone who can actually provide." John bit into his stale bread, pretending not to hear. Every cruel word felt like a knife. But he reminded himself of Zoe's smile, of her faith in him. That faith kept him alive. When the shift ended, John stayed behind. The supervisor approached him. "You want extra hours again?" the man asked. "Yes, sir," John replied. "I will do whatever it takes." The supervisor shook his head. "You are wearing yourself out. But if you insist, stay and unload the trucks." John nodded. Even though exhaustion already weighed on him like iron, he worked until midnight, his body trembling with fatigue. Finally, he stumbled back home. Zoe was waiting at the door, her eyes wide with worry. "John, where have you been?" "It is so late. I took more hours," he said softly. "We need the money, Zoe. I cannot let us fall behind." She touched his face gently, her eyes shining with tears. "John, I do not need riches. I just need you. I would rather have less money and more of your health." John smiled weakly, though his chest tightened with guilt. "I know, Zoe, but I want to give you the life you deserve. Please trust me." They sat together in silence that night, Zoe leaning against his shoulder while his weary body begged for rest. Outside, the world mocked him, but inside that small home, love gave him reason to keep fighting. Days turned into weeks, and John's routine grew harsher. Every morning, before the sky even lightened, he was already on his way to the factory. His body bore the marks of exhaustion, his hands raw and cracked, his back stiff with pain. Yet he never complained. One evening, as John was walking home, he heard laughter behind him. A group of young men stood on the corner, smirking. "There he is," one of them jeered. "The man who breaks his back for crumbs." Another added, "Does your wife even respect you, John? Or does she dream of someone who can give her more?" John stopped, his fist tightening, but he did not turn around. He had no energy left for arguments. Silence was his shield, and pride his only armor. When he entered the small home, Zoe was preparing dinner. The smell of boiled potatoes filled the air. She turned quickly, her eyes lighting up at the sight of him. "You are home, John. Sit, please. The food is simple tonight, but I hope it will fill you." John kissed her forehead gently. "Simple or not, it is perfect, because you made it." They sat together at the table, the soft glow of a single lamp above them. For a moment, the world outside seemed distant. "John, I heard the neighbors again, today," Zoe said softly. "They laugh at you. They say cruel things. It breaks my heart." John's voice was calm, though weariness clung to every word. "Let them laugh. They do not know what it means to fight for someone you love. I am not ashamed of what I do." Zoe reached for his hand, squeezing it tightly. "I love you for that, John. Not for what you can buy, but for who you are." The next day, a storm rolled over the city. Rain poured heavily, drenching the streets. John's boots filled with water as he hurried to the factory. Inside, the workers muttered about the weather, but John focused on the crates he was tasked to carry. His supervisor barked again. "Faster, John, we have deadlines." John pushed harder, lifting until his muscles screamed. A co-worker passed by, whispering mockingly, "Careful, old man. Your bones might break before your spirit does." John ignored him and kept working. By the end of the shift, his body was soaked, his throat burning from the damp air. On the bus home, he coughed violently, covering his mouth with his hand. An old woman sitting nearby frowned with concern. "You should see a doctor, young man. That cough sounds dangerous." "I will be fine," John replied with a weak smile. "I just need rest." But rest never came. That night, Zoe sat by his side as he shivered under the thin blanket. She touched his forehead, feeling the heat of fever. "John, you are burning up," she whispered, fear in her voice. "You need help." John shook his head. "We cannot afford it right now." "I will be fine, Zoe. I just need to sleep." She held his hand, tears sliding down her cheeks. "You are not alone in this, John. Please do not carry all the pain by yourself." John closed his eyes, his breath shallow, and whispered, "As long as you smile, Zoe, I can endure anything." The fever lingered for days, but John forced himself back to the factory. He could not bear the thought of missing a day's wage. Zoe begged him to stay home, yet he stood firm. "Zoe, please," he said gently as he buttoned his worn shirt. "If I stop working even for a day, we may not make it through the month." She clutched his arm desperately. "Your health matters more than rent, John. What will I do if something happens to you?" John smiled weakly, though his eyes were tired. "Nothing will happen. I have survived worse." When he arrived at the factory, his weakness was obvious. His steps were slow, his breath uneven. His supervisor noticed immediately. "John, if you cannot work at full pace, You are useless here. The man barked. I can work, John insisted. Please do not send me home. The supervisor scowled but waved him on. Then prove it. Get those crates moved. John obeyed, pushing his body beyond its limit. Every lift made his vision blur, but he kept going. Co-workers whispered among themselves. Look at him. He is going to collapse, one said. Another smirked. Maybe that would be better. At least then he would stop pretending he can handle this. By midday, John's shirt was drenched in sweat. His cough grew worse, rattling through his chest. During the short break, he sat alone, his hands trembling as he tried to eat a piece of bread. One co-worker passed by, tossing a coin on the table with a mocking laugh. Here, John. Buy yourself something better than that pitiful lunch. John looked at the coin, but left it untouched. He had learned long ago that dignity was not something others could give or take away. That evening, the rain had returned. John stumbled home through the downpour, his boots heavy with mud. When he opened the door, Zoe rushed toward him, her eyes full of alarm. John, you look pale. Sit down right now. He tried to reassure her, though his voice was hoarse. I am fine, Zoe, just tired. She pressed a cup of warm tea into his hands. I do not believe you. Your cough is worse and your hands are shaking. Please, John, let me take you to the clinic. We cannot afford it, he said quietly, staring at the steam rising from the cup. The money must go to rent and food. Zoe's eyes filled with tears. And what if you collapse one day at work? What will food or rent matter? Then if I lose you? John set the cup down and pulled her close, his arms weak but filled with love. I promise you, Zoe, I will endure. I will keep going as long as I have strength. That night, as Zoe slept, John lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling. His chest ached with every breath. He thought of all the insults, all the laughter thrown at him by neighbors and co-workers. Yet none of it mattered compared to the thought of Zoe's smile. He whispered to himself in the darkness, as long as she is safe, I can bear any burden. The days grew colder as winter settled in. John's cough deepened, echoing in his chest like a drum. Yet every morning, he forced himself out of bed before dawn. Zoe would plead with him, her voice trembling with worry, but his determination remained unshaken. John, please, she begged one morning, wrapping a scarf around his neck. At least stay home until the fever breaks. He kissed her forehead softly. I cannot, Zoe. If I do not work, we cannot survive. You know this. Tears welled in her eyes. I would rather starve with you than live without you. John smiled faintly, hiding the heaviness in his chest. You will never starve as long as I breathe. That is my promise. At the factory, his weakness became obvious. Each box he lifted felt twice as heavy, each step slower than the last. The supervisor noticed and scowled. John, you are dragging behind again. If you cannot keep up, I will cut your hours. John straightened his back, fighting the dizziness. No, sir, I can manage. Please let me stay. The man grunted and walked away, muttering under his breath. Pathetic fool. During the lunch break, John sat on a crate in the corner, coughing violently into his sleeve. A co-worker approached with a cruel grin. Still alive, John. That cough of yours could wake the dead. Maybe you should quit before you drop. John wiped his mouth, his voice steady despite the pain. I cannot quit. My family depends on me. The co-worker laughed and walked off, leaving John alone with his stale bread. That evening, on the way home, the bus broke down. John decided to walk the remaining miles through the freezing wind. By the time he reached home, his clothes were soaked and his lips blue. Zoe gasped when she saw him. John, you are freezing. Sit by the fire now. He sank into the chair, shivering uncontrollably. Zoe wrapped him in blankets, tears running down her face. You are killing yourself for this job. Please listen to me. We can find another way. John shook his head weakly. There is no other way right now. As long as I can stand, I will fight. That night, Zoe lay awake beside him, listening to his labored breathing. She pressed her hand to his chest, feeling the uneven rhythm of his heart. Fear gnawed at her, but John's hand found hers in the dark. Do not cry, Zoe, he whispered faintly. As long as you have me, you have everything. Zoe closed her eyes, silently begging fate to show mercy. She loved him more than words could express, but she knew the battle he fought was one that could not last forever. Outside, the world was blind to his struggle. Neighbors still gossiped, co-workers still mocked. Yet within their small home, John's love burned brighter than all the cruelty surrounding them. Winter tightened its grip on the city, and John's body was beginning to betray him. His cough no longer came in short bursts, but in long, violent fits that left him gasping for air. Still, He rose each morning, determined to keep his promise. One morning, Zoe placed her hands firmly on his chest, refusing to let him leave the bed. John, you cannot go today. Look at you. You are pale and weak. You will collapse if you keep this up. John lifted her hands gently, kissing them. Zoe, I must. If I stay, we will fall behind on rent. I cannot let that happen. Her voice cracked with desperation. And what if you collapse at work? What will rent matter then? What will money mean if I lose you? John cupped her face with trembling hands. I would rather die trying than sit here and watch you suffer without food or shelter. Please understand. Zoe broke down in tears, but she knew his mind could not be changed. She packed a small lunch for him, though her hands shook as she placed the bread and a bit of dried fruit inside. At the factory, John's body struggled to keep pace. His vision blurred, his legs wobbled beneath him. Co-workers watched with mocking smirks. Look at him, another whispered. He looks like he is about to drop dead. The supervisor barked at him. John, either move faster or go home. I cannot afford dead weight in this factory. I can do it, sir, John answered, his voice hoarse but steady. He forced himself to lift another crate, his arms trembling violently. The world spun for a moment, and he nearly fell, but he caught himself against a wall. During the break, one younger worker sat beside him. Unlike the others, he spoke softly. John, why do you keep doing this to yourself? No job is worth dying for. John gave him a faint smile. It is not for the job. It is for my wife. She is my reason. The young man looked at him in silence, almost ashamed. He had never seen such devotion in anyone before. That evening, John stumbled through the door of his home, his body nearly giving out. Zoe rushed to him, her arms around his shoulders, as she guided him to the chair. John, you are getting worse. Please, I beg you, let me take you to the clinic. We cannot afford it, Zoe, he whispered. Do not worry. I am strong. I will endure. She knelt before him, tears streaming down her cheeks. Strong men fall too, John. Please, I do not care about money or rent. I only care about you. John stroked her hair, his voice barely above a whisper. You are the reason I wake each day. Without you, none of this would matter. That night, Zoe held him as he shivered in his sleep. His breath uneven, his body frail. Deep in her heart, fear grew like a shadow, whispering that their time together might be shorter than she ever imagined. The factory floor buzzed with the usual noise of machinery, but John's struggle stood out more than ever. His cough echoed over the clanging metal, his chest rattling like a broken engine. Still, he carried crate after crate, his face pale, his lips cracked from the cold. The supervisor crossed his arms, glaring. John, you are slower every day. If you cannot keep up, do not bother showing up tomorrow. John straightened himself, though his knees shook under his weight. Please, sir, just give me a chance. I can do this. One co-worker laughed loudly. He can barely stand. Watch. He will collapse before he finishes this shift. Another added cruelly. Maybe that would be a blessing. At least then, we would not have to watch him pretend to be strong. John ignored the voices, lifting another crate. His arms quivered, sweat dripping down his forehead despite the winter chill. Suddenly, his vision blurred, and the crate slipped from his hands, crashing to the ground. A loud cough tore from his chest, blood staining his sleeve. The room fell silent. One of the men who had mocked him earlier stepped back in shock. Did you see that he coughed blood? The supervisor barked. Get back to work. John, clean yourself up and stop making a scene. But the younger worker, who had spoken kindly before, rushed to John's side. John, you cannot keep this up. You need a doctor right now. John shook his head weakly, clutching his chest. No, I cannot stop. My wife, she needs me. The young worker's voice softened. You will not help her if you die here. For the first time, some of the mocking co-workers shifted uncomfortably. Their smirks faded as they watched John struggle to stay upright, his body trembling violently. By the end of the shift, John could barely walk. The younger worker helped him outside, ignoring the disapproving look of the supervisor. Take my arm, John. Let me help you. John gave him a grateful smile, though his face was ashen. Thank you. But I can manage. I always have. On the bus ride home, John sat silently, his chest rising and falling unevenly. The old woman who had once warned him about his cough was there again, her eyes filled with pity. Young man, you cannot go on like this. Please listen to me. John forced a small smile. Thank you for your kindness, but I must keep my word to my wife. She depends on me. When he arrived home, Zoe nearly screamed when she saw the blood on his sleeve. John, What happened to you? It is nothing, Zoe. Just a little cough, that is all. Do not lie to me. She clutched his face, her eyes filled with fear and anger. You are dying in front of me, and you still say it is nothing. John pulled her close, his voice weak but steady. Zoe, listen to me. If I fall, know it was never in vain. Every step, every breath was for you. Her tears fell on his chest as she held him tightly. In that moment, the walls of their small home felt like a fortress, shielding them from a cruel world that never understood his sacrifice. The next morning, John could barely lift himself from the bed. His chest felt like it was on fire, every breath ragged and sharp. Zoe clung to his hand, her eyes swollen from crying through the night. John, please, do not go today. You cannot even stand. He forced a faint smile, though his body trembled. Zoe, if I stop now, everything we have worked for will crumble. Just one more day. She shook her head violently. You are killing yourself. What if today is the day you do not come home? John kissed her hand softly. Then remember that everything I did was for you. With great effort, he stood, his legs weak, but his resolve strong. He stumbled to the factory, every step feeling heavier than the last. When he arrived, the usual laughter did not come. His co-workers stared at him in silence, seeing how pale and frail he had become. Even the supervisor hesitated before barking orders. John, are you sure you can work today? You look worse than yesterday. I can work, John replied firmly, though his voice was faint. Please, let me. He began lifting crates, his arms trembling violently. Each time he coughed, blood speckled his sleeve. The factory floor grew quieter, with every sound from his lungs. The men who once mocked him now exchanged uneasy glances, guilt creeping into their eyes. Halfway through the shift, John suddenly collapsed to his knees, clutching his chest. The younger worker ran to him instantly. John, stop. You cannot go on like this. John tried to push himself up. No, I must keep going. Zoe needs me. The supervisor frowned, but his voice was softer than usual. John, you need a hospital. This is not just a cough anymore. John's vision blurred, and he shook his head. I cannot afford it. I cannot waste money on myself. The younger worker's voice cracked with emotion. This is not wasting money. This is your life. The factory fell into silence. Even those who once mocked him lowered their heads. For the first time, they saw not a desperate man, but a husband willing to break his body for love. The younger worker helped John to a chair and brought him water. John's hands shook as he drank, his chest heaving. Thank you, John whispered. You are kind. The man looked at him, his throat tight. No, John, you are the kind one. You are the strongest man I have ever seen. When John finally returned home that night, Zoe rushed to him, tears spilling down her cheeks. She held him tightly, as if afraid he would vanish. John, please, no more. I cannot bear to watch you destroy yourself for me. John placed a trembling hand on her cheek. Zoe, you are my reason for everything. If I stop, I will break my promise. And I cannot break it. Not to you. She sobbed into his chest, knowing the end was drawing closer, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. The following day, John could barely breathe. His chest rattled with every inhale, his body trembling even as he tried to stand. Zoe begged him with all her strength. John, please listen to me. You cannot go back there. If you do, I know you will not return. John brushed a strand of hair from her face, his own eyes dim with exhaustion. Zoe, if I do not go, how will we survive? How will we pay for food or rent? I must keep my word. Her tears fell freely. I would rather lose the house, lose everything, than lose you. But John only kissed her forehead and whispered, My love, I cannot stop. Not yet. He staggered to the factory, each step heavier than the last. His co-workers fell silent when he entered. The mocking had long since died. Now there was only unease. His pale face, his blood-stained sleeve, his hollow eyes. He looked like a ghost walking among them. The younger worker rushed to him. John, go home. Please. You are not fit to work. John shook his head. I must. Just one more day. He began to lift a crate, his arms trembling violently. His vision swam, his breath caught. Suddenly, his knees buckled, and he fell hard to the ground. The factory froze. The supervisor, usually cruel, rushed forward with panic in his voice. John, stay with us. Do not close your eyes. John gasped, clutching his chest. His voice was weak but steady. I promised Zoe I would keep going. I cannot stop. The younger worker knelt beside him, tears in his eyes. No, John, you have done enough. More than anyone. You do not need to prove anything anymore. Co-workers who once mocked him stood around in silence, shame painted across their faces. One whispered hoarsely, "We laughed at him while he was breaking himself to feed his family. We are monsters." The supervisor barked orders, but his voice shook. "Call for help, now." They carried John outside, laying him on a bench while waiting. His chest rose and fell unevenly, his breath shallow. The younger worker held his hand. "Stay with us, John. Your wife needs you." John's lips curved into a faint smile. "Tell Zoe, she was my strength. Every day. It was all for her." By the time the bus took him home, Zoe was already waiting at the door. She screamed when she saw him being carried. "John, no." She fell to her knees beside him, holding his face in her trembling hands. "Please do not leave me. Stay with me." John looked at her with fading eyes, whispering through shallow breaths, "Zoe, I love you. Always. Remember me not for my struggle, but for my love." His head sank against her shoulder as his body gave way to exhaustion, the world slipping from his grasp. Zoe cried out into the cold night, her sobs echoing through the small street. Neighbors who had once mocked him watched from their windows, their hearts heavy with guilt. For the first time, they saw the truth of John's life. He was never a failure. He was a man who gave everything he had for love. The morning after John's final breath, the world outside looked cruelly ordinary. The sun rose as if nothing had changed. Children laughed on their way to school, and merchants opened their stalls. But inside Zoe's home, silence weighed like a stone. She sat beside John's still body, her hands wrapped around his calloused palms that had once carried the weight of their lives. Her tears had dried into streaks across her cheeks, but her chest ached with an emptiness she could not describe. Neighbors began to gather outside. For years they had mocked him, whispered cruel words, and turned their backs on his struggle. Now their eyes were downcast, their hearts pierced with guilt. One old woman finally stepped forward, whispering through trembling lips, "We were blind." We laughed while he bled for his family. The younger worker from the factory came, his head bowed. He placed a bundle of food and money on the table. "Zoe, I should have stood by him sooner. He was stronger than all of us. Please forgive me for staying silent." Zoe nodded weakly, though words escaped her. She looked at John's face, peaceful now in rest, and whispered so only he could hear, "You were never a failure. You were my hero." The day of his burial, the small town fell into rare quiet. Men who had once mocked him carried his coffin on their shoulders, their eyes wet with tears. Women who had gossiped about him clutched flowers in their hands. Children, too young to understand, followed behind holding on to their mothers. At the graveside, Zoe knelt as the earth swallowed the wooden box that held her husband. She placed her hands in the dirt and spoke with trembling strength. "You gave everything, John. Even when your body broke, your love did not. I promise your struggle will not be forgotten." The priest spoke, but his words were not what remained. What stayed in the hearts of those gathered was the truth carved by John's life. That dignity was not in wealth or strength, but in sacrifice and love. In the weeks that followed, people began to change. The factory workers who once sneered worked harder, with respect for the struggle of others. The neighbors who mocked began offering help to struggling families, and whenever they spoke of John, their voices softened with reverence. But for Zoe, the nights were the hardest. She would sit by the window, staring at the empty chair where John once sat, listening for a voice that would never return. She whispered into the dark, "I will carry your love with me, always." Though John's body had broken, his legacy lived on in every heart he had touched, even in those who once scorned him. His life became a story told from home to home, a reminder that true strength is not measured in riches or pride, but in the quiet sacrifices made for those we love. And so, John, the man who was mocked for his struggle, became immortal in memory, etched not as a failure, but as a symbol of devotion that no cruelty could erase. Let John's story remind us that behind every tired smile and every calloused hand, there is a heart carrying the weight of love and sacrifice. Never judge someone for their struggles, because you may not see the battles they fight each day. Honor those who give their all for their family, because sometimes their silent fight is the greatest act of love.